I still remember the way the air felt heavy that night, the dim glow of my living room, his quiet breath on my couch, and the way our eyes lingered longer than they should have when I brought him a blanket. Al wasn't supposed to stay, and I definitely wasn't supposed to let him get that close. But somehow, by sunrise, the couch wasn't where he woke up. Disclaimer: this content is intended for mature audiences only. Viewer discretion is advised. Al was never supposed to be more than a friend, a safe shoulder to lean on when everything with my husband felt like it was crumbling. He'd been crashing on my couch for 2 nights, helping me fix a leaky faucet, making sure I wasn't alone in that quiet house that had grown too cold, too empty. He wasn't the kind of man you planned to fall for: broad shoulders, easy smile, and the kind of gaze that made you question your own promises. But when the night stretches long and silence presses in, temptation doesn't knock. It slips in unnoticed. I told myself it was harmless, just 2 friends sharing space, trying to ignore the growing tension between us. My husband was out of town, working another late job, leaving me in a home that didn't feel like home anymore. Al never crossed a line, not really, but the way he'd brush past me in the kitchen, his hand lingering a little too close, or the way his voice softened when he asked if I was okay, made every moment feel charged. It was wrong, but it felt so real. That last night, it started with rain. The storm outside rattled the windows, the kind of night where the world feels a little too big and lonely. I found him sitting on the couch, staring at the floor, his hair damp from running in the rain. Something about that moment, 2 people, soaked and tired, holding on to pieces of their own loneliness, made the space between us shrink in ways I couldn't control. He looked at me, not like a friend, not like someone staying for convenience, but like someone who saw me, really saw me. I don't remember who leaned closer first, only that my breath caught and the room felt too small for the both of us. My thoughts raced, warning me of everything I stood to lose, yet my body betrayed me, inch by inch, toward the one thing I knew I shouldn't want. My wedding ring felt like it burned against my skin, but in that moment, Al's presence was the only thing grounding me. The clock ticked past midnight. The couch sat between us, a thin line of safety that wouldn't hold much longer. His hand brushed mine, just once, a touch so light it could have been an accident. My heart pounded, every nerve alive with a tension I couldn't name, and when his eyes met mine, I knew the decision was coming. Would I pull away? Or would I let that storm outside seep into us, tearing apart everything I thought I knew? And then, the bedroom light flicked on, casting a glow down the hallway. The soft light from the bedroom doorway lingered, spilling into the hallway like a secret waiting to be uncovered. I froze, my breath catching in my throat, the space between Al and me tightening even though we hadn't moved. Neither of us spoke, but I could feel it, the heaviness of everything unsaid, everything hovering just close enough to touch but too dangerous to reach for. The storm outside thundered, masking the sound of our hearts beating too fast. I stepped back first, tucking a strand of damp hair behind my ear and forcing my hands into my pockets. Al's jaw tightened, his eyes flicking toward the bedroom light before landing back on me. He didn't say it, but I could see it in his face, the question neither of us wanted to answer. What are we doing? The line between comfort and temptation had blurred, and we both felt it. I thought back to how all of this began. Just a week ago, I'd been sitting alone at that same couch, my husband's voice crackling through the phone, reminding me that his job keeps the bills paid, as though that was supposed to make the empty dinners and quiet nights easier. Al had shown up later that evening, unannounced but welcome, with that easy smile that never felt rehearsed. He'd been my friend for years, someone who always seemed to appear when things were breaking apart. Maybe that was why I didn't tell him no when he asked to crash here while his apartment was fumigated. Maybe that was why I noticed the way his laughter filled the silence better than any phone call ever did. Tonight, though, something had shifted. The storm outside only made it worse, the flicker of lightning catching in his eyes, the sound of rain drumming against the window as though urging the moment forward. My hands trembled slightly as I moved toward the kitchen, needing space, distance, anything to keep my thoughts from running where they shouldn't. I could still feel the ghost of his hand brushing mine, a single accidental touch that felt anything but accidental. Al followed me, slowly, his footsteps soft but deliberate. I didn't turn around, but I felt him stop just behind me, close enough that the warmth of his presence cut through the chill in the air. The rain pounded harder against the glass, and somewhere deep down, I wondered if the storm outside was just a reflection of the one we were about to step into. The sound of the rain was the only thing filling the silence between us, each drop against the glass a reminder of how close we stood without saying a word. I could feel Al behind me, his presence heavier than the storm, and it made the kitchen feel smaller, tighter. My fingers dug into the edge of the counter, grounding myself, because the warmth radiating off him was starting to drown out the voice in my head telling me this was wrong. He spoke first, his voice low, like he didn't want to wake whatever line we were both teetering on. "You okay?" The question was simple, but the weight behind it made my chest ache. I wanted to say yes. I wanted to tell him I was fine, that this was nothing more than a moment caught in bad weather and loneliness. But when I turned to face him, the truth got stuck somewhere in my throat. Al's eyes held mine longer than they should have, soft but searching, like he was trying to read every thought I wasn't saying. There was something in the way he looked at me, something careful, protective, but undeniably drawn in, like he was fighting the same storm I was. My pulse quickened, and for a second, I wondered if he could hear it. I told myself to step back, to put space between us, but instead I found myself brushing past him to grab a glass of water, only for his hand to graze mine again. It was small, fleeting, but it sent a shiver up my arm. I jerked back, more from the shock of my own reaction than his touch, and the glass trembled slightly in my grip. He noticed. Of course he did. "You're shaking," he murmured, stepping just close enough that I could smell the rain in his clothes, that subtle mix of storm and warmth that pulled me in against my better judgment. I swallowed hard, clutching the glass like it was the only thing keeping me steady. "I'm fine," I lied, but the words didn't even sound convincing to my own ears. For a long moment, neither of us moved. The storm outside roared louder, the lights flickered, and the shadows in the room stretched long across the walls. It felt like the whole house was holding its breath, waiting. Then, almost without thinking, Al reached out, not to grab me, not to cross any obvious line, but to gently tuck a strand of wet hair behind my ear. It was the smallest gesture, but it made my chest tighten, my breath shallow. I didn't pull away. I couldn't. Every inch of me was caught between the memory of my vows and the reality of the man standing inches away, close enough to touch, close enough to destroy everything if either of us gave in for even a second. And in the silence, with the storm rattling the windows, I wondered which would break first, my restraint, or my heart. The storm outside had quieted to a steady drizzle, but inside, the air was still charged, thick with everything we weren't saying. Al's hand lingered just long enough by my cheek for me to feel the warmth of it, a fleeting contact that burned more than it soothed. I should have stepped back, created distance, done anything but stand frozen beneath the weight of his eyes. But the truth was, I didn't want to move. Not yet. Every sound in the house felt amplified, the hum of the fridge, the faint creak of the floorboards as Al shifted his weight, even the shallow rhythm of my own breath. My fingers tightened around the glass in my hand until I set it down, afraid I'd drop it. When I finally looked at him, really looked, I saw the hesitation mirrored in his expression. He wanted to close the space between us as much as I did, but he was holding himself back, and that restraint only made the pull stronger. His voice was barely above a whisper when he spoke. "If I stay here tonight, like this, we can't pretend it doesn't mean something." The words sank deep, leaving a silence heavier than any thunderstorm. My throat tightened. I wanted to answer, but no words came. My mind screamed for reason, reminding me of vows, promises, and everything beyond this moment, yet my body betrayed me, leaning ever so slightly toward him as though drawn by gravity. A streak of lightning illuminated the room, casting shadows across his face, sharpening the angles of his jaw, and in that flicker, the truth hit me harder than the storm ever could. One more step, one more breath shared too close, and nothing would be the same. My heart raced so fast I thought it might break the silence itself. I bit my lip, glancing toward the hallway where the soft bedroom light still glowed faintly, an unspoken reminder of where this road could lead. Al followed my gaze, his jaw tightening, his hands flexing at his sides as though fighting every impulse to reach for me. The distance between us was only a few feet, but it felt like the thinnest, most fragile barrier in the world, one I wasn't sure either of us could hold for much longer. The room felt like it was holding its breath, every second stretching longer than it should. I could feel Al's eyes on me, that unspoken pull between us getting harder to ignore. My chest rose and fell faster than I wanted it to, like my body already knew where this moment could lead even if my mind kept trying to stop it. The storm outside faded into a faint patter, but inside, it felt like the real storm was just beginning. He took one careful step closer. Just one. Close enough that I could see the droplets of rain still clinging to his hair, the faint tremor in his hand as he tucked it into his pocket instead of reaching for me. The restraint in that single action made my breath catch. He was holding back, and somehow, that only made me want him more. I opened my mouth to say something, anything to cut through the tension, when the sound shattered through the air, my phone buzzing on the counter. Loud. Sharp. My husband's name lighting up the screen. The spell broke, but the aftermath lingered. Al's jaw tightened, his eyes flicking to the phone and then back to me, as if waiting to see what I'd do. My heart pounded so hard it almost drowned out the buzz. I didn't answer. Couldn't. The screen went dark, but the silence that followed was even louder. Al exhaled, low and heavy, running a hand through his wet hair. "You should probably get that," he said, though his tone was rough, conflicted, like he didn't mean it. The way he stood there, still close, still tense, told me everything he wasn't saying. I shook my head, my voice barely above a whisper. "I can't, not right now." My fingers grazed the phone, but I didn't pick it up. I couldn't bring myself to bridge that gap, not with my husband, not with Al standing so close I could feel the heat radiating off him. Another flash of lightning lit up the room, followed by a distant rumble of thunder, and for a moment, neither of us moved. We just stood there, locked in this quiet, dangerous limbo. The phone buzzed again, vibrating against the counter, and I realized the choice I was avoiding wouldn't stay avoided much longer. Al's voice cut through the quiet, softer this time, but it carried a weight that made my stomach twist. "If you answer, we go back to pretending. If you don't," his words trailed off, heavy with the unspoken what if. The phone stopped buzzing. Silence. And in that suspended moment, the distance between us felt like it was shrinking, whether we wanted it to or not. The kitchen was so quiet I could hear the faint ticking of the clock on the wall. My phone sat on the counter, screen dark now, but the weight of those missed calls pressed heavier than the storm outside. Al hadn't moved, and neither had I. The distance between us was almost nothing, and in that moment, it felt like a choice hung in the air, one we couldn't avoid any longer. I turned to face him fully, my voice low, unsteady. "I can't keep pretending I don't feel this." The words slipped out before I could take them back, and the second they did, everything shifted. Al's jaw tightened, his chest rising as though he'd been holding his breath for hours. His hand lifted, hesitated in the space between us, then finally rested gently against my cheek. Warm, steady, careful, like he was touching something fragile. The pull between us finally snapped. I closed the space, my forehead brushing his, both of us standing in the soft glow of the hallway light, hearts pounding loud enough to drown out the rain. It wasn't frantic, not rushed, it was quiet, deliberate, like both of us knew what this meant. Every brush of his breath, every inch closer, carried the weight of everything we'd been denying. And then, a knock at the front door shattered it. Sharp. Loud. Jarring. We froze. Al stepped back, his hand falling away. My heart dropped as I turned toward the sound, dread curling in my stomach. The knock came again, harder this time. I glanced at Al, his expression was unreadable, but tense, and slowly made my way to the door. When I opened it, I didn't see my husband. Instead, I found a neighbor, breathless and panicked, pointing toward the street. "Your husband's car, it's wrapped around a pole down by the corner. They're calling for an ambulance." The world tilted. The storm outside felt suddenly deafening again, the rain cold against my skin as I stumbled back, my mind struggling to catch up. Al was already grabbing his jacket, his voice steady but urgent as he told me to get my things, that we had to go. The kiss, the tension, the choices, they all hung in the air, suspended, as the night took a turn neither of us could have seen coming. The drive to the crash site felt endless, the storm blurring the road ahead like the world itself wanted to keep me from seeing what waited. Al kept his hands steady on the wheel, but I could see the tension in his jaw, the way his knuckles tightened every time the wipers scraped across the glass. My mind raced between two thoughts: my husband, broken and bleeding somewhere ahead, and the undeniable truth of what had just almost happened between Al and me. When we arrived, the flashing red and blue lights painted the night in harsh strokes. My husband was alive, conscious, leaning against a paramedic as they checked his vitals. Relief crashed over me, sharp and overwhelming. I ran to him, my hands shaking as I reached out. He looked up at me, exhausted and dazed, murmuring something about falling asleep at the wheel. He didn't ask why I looked so pale, or why Al was the one who brought me. Maybe he didn't notice, or maybe he was too tired to care. Back home, the silence between Al and me felt heavier than ever. The storm had passed, but the weight of what we'd shared lingered like the scent of rain on the air. He stood in the doorway, his bag already slung over his shoulder. "You should be with him," he said softly, not bitter, just final. "Tonight was complicated. But you need to figure out where your heart really is." I wanted to argue, to tell him that the pull between us wasn't something I could just switch off, but the truth was, he was right. My husband was alive, and I owed it to myself, and to him, to make a choice with a clear head, not in the shadows of a storm. As Al walked out into the damp night, I sat on the edge of the couch, staring at the faint glow of the bedroom down the hall. The same couch where all of this began. The same night that had almost unraveled everything. My fingers traced the fabric absent-mindedly as the weight of the last few hours settled in. I remembered that first moment, bringing Al a blanket, the quiet way his breath filled the room, the charged look in his eyes when he thanked me. That was the night the line blurred. And now, as the dawn broke and the house finally felt still, I knew one thing for certain: that night changed me. Not because of what happened, but because of what almost did.